Hallo und herzlich willkommen zur nächsten Ausgabe von Beer Lovers Drink at Home. Heute Abend, glaube ich, ist es uns gelungen, sehr spezielle Gäste zu bekommen. Zum einen ist es Founders Brewing Company, die sicher für euch alle ein klingender Name ist und ein Begriff ist. Und dann haben wir den Jonathan, der seines Zeichens für den Export zuständig ist. Aber auf der anderen Seite sitzt der Jeremy, der uns live zugeschaltet ist aus Grand Rapids und ja, man kann so fast sagen, der Erfinder des Session IPs ist und sehr, sehr viele interessante Geschichten erzählen kann. Aber bevor wir zu den zwei kommen, ganz kurz für all jene, die zum ersten Mal dabei sind, ganz kurz, ihr habt wieder in den Paketen kurze Vorstellung der Gäste, dann auf der Rückseite die Reihenfolge der Biere, die verkostet werden. Und dann habt ihr noch die Möglichkeit, euch Notizen zu machen zu den unterschiedlichen Bieren, die alle sehr, sehr fantastisch schmecken. So, now, good evening, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to having you, and especially Jonathan. You're not so hard to catch, but I think that Jeremy is a big surprise for all the Austrians here, that we get the chance to talk with Jeremy and you, Jonathan. And I would say, before we start with Jeremy, Jonathan, tell us a little bit about you and about history of Founders, when Founders started, where they are now. So that
right. So I'm Jonathan. I'm the Director of International Business here at Founders Brewing Company. What that means in its fancy title is that I'm responsible for selling all of the beer outside of the USA. Right now we're exporting to 32 different countries. Primarily the most of them in the EU, of course, then a number in the Pacific markets, Canada, couple in South America, right? We've been exporting beer probably since about 2013. And, we're just really glad to finally be able to bring some beer to Austria. What else can I tell you? I've been at Founders now, going on my 8th or so year. I joined Founders in 2013, and I was working for them in a sales capacity in the States, and then moved over to Europe to work in the Nordic markets, and then been running the whole international show since about 2018. So it's been definitely a fun ride. We always love getting Jeremy over to some of these things, and now online with this capacity. So my thanks to Jeremy, my thanks to you guys for having us and showcasing us a bit to our fans in Austria.
That's cool to hear. Only quick, when Founders was founded?
So Founders has been around for 25 years. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. It was founded back in '97 by two friends from university, Mike Stevens and Dave Engbers, and we're incredibly grateful and give them our love for them taking a massive risk in their lives and almost bankrupting themselves a number of times so that we can drink some world-class beer from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I think one of the short version of the long story is that early, and Jeremy's been here longer than I have, and he was privy right almost in the beginning. The short version is that in the beginning they were making kind of some mediocre beer, and people weren't really responding to it well, and they might have had to hawk some equipment to pay some people, and things got dicey. But for the grace of a great brewer like Jeremy and some other happy accidents we had along the way, Founders grew up and grew into one of the most celebrated craft breweries, in American brewing history at this point. So we're humble and grateful to be where we're at. And I think we all have long memories back to when, or at least for me, when I joined Founders, it was not what it is today. It was medium-sized brewery that was known for making great beer regionally. And I joined right around the time when Jeremy let us release All Day IPA, and I've gotten to witness this kind of evolution of the brewery that's been just an incredible ride, going from a really strong medium-sized brewery to one of the biggest breweries in the country and most well-known breweries in the world now. So
cool. But it is the truth. And what I wrote is that the first 3 years was really, really tough for those two, because they were really near bankrupt in the beginning,
Yeah, they back in the mid to late 90s, the craft beer scene in America was just getting started, and it wasn't really the people making the beer. We weren't sure what the public wanted. So every little brewery had their pretty basic styles of beers. Maybe a pale ale and an amber ale and a wheat beer, and probably a lager. If you were really out there, you might have an IPA or a stout. So they were making those kind of beers like everybody was, and it was hard to really get ahead in the pack. They were starting to see more breweries pop up, kind of doing the same thing, and there was really nothing to separate Founders from anything else that was going on.
Okay.
Yeah, those are
your time started, huh?
So I started in 2000, and this was my first professional brewing gig. I was unemployed at the time. Had been doing auto detailing, which is the trade where you clean up an old used car and make it look brand new for resale. That's where I learned my famous attention to detail, which has come to serve me well in my brewing career. There's a lot of you just can't overlook anything in the process of brewing, and it's all about doing perfectly, especially as far as cleanliness and sanitization. But I needed a gig. I wanted out of that. I either wanted to be a rock and roll guitar player or
but you're still playing, huh?
I do, yes. I managed to separate them so that one's a job and one's a hobby, and I think I made the right choice with that.
I agree on that.
but rock and roll still is fun. But it was my wife. Well, she was my girlfriend then, but she's the one that was sick of me moping around the house, being unemployed and crying, and because I had no future. And she's like, go down to Founders, just go there and apply. And Founders wasn't my favorite brewery in town. They weren't. I was a Bell's guy. You guys get Bell's out there, but that was a big inspiration for me as I was learning to homebrew and things like that. I wanted to make beers that big mouthfeel, big flavor, just things that those are the kind of things that would really drew me into craft beer to begin with. So but Founders was the biggest place in town. They had a 30-barrel brew house and a packaging line with glass. So they weren't brew pub. They were committed to distribute beer. So there was some opportunity there, and I went down and my first day, I went down there to ask if they're hiring for anything. I would have taken anything at that point. And the bartender said, let me go get a guy. And the guy that ran the packaging line, who was the assistant brewer at the time, came out and asked if I could start right then. What are you doing today? I said, nothing. I'm hoping someone will buy me a beer around here or something. So I went back and then started on the packaging line, and it wasn't it was just entry level, putting glass on the conveyors. You take them off at the end, and you load the case boxes up, and you hot glue it shut, and you stack it on a skid. None of those jobs exist for us anymore. They're all done by machines and robots. So it's kind of a throwback when I tell people, see that machine right there? Yeah, that was my first job. But it wasn't full time. It was a couple days a week at best. And like I said, it wasn't a salary job. It was under the table cash and free beer, basically, is how they kept my attention. But it was a foot in the door, and like I said, I had nothing to lose. I was glad to get into the industry. It wasn't long before I realized the dire nature of Founders and how much we were struggling, because that was 2000, 2001. There was problems.
Period, huh?
It was, even once I did get on the payroll, there was no guarantee that checks weren't going to bounce, or, frequently I would get asked, can you not cash this quite yet?
Because I have to pay my checks as well. Yeah.
I got no money either, man. But we made it through. I love Mike and Dave, that they were just good-hearted people that, they were fun to hang out with. I appreciated their passion and their vision. And fortunately, it got to the point where, when I took over as assistant brewer, one of my home brewing partners had just taken over as the brewer there also. So we got to kind of work together. He had been assistant brewer at another local brewery that actually had the same brew house as us. So it was a pretty easy transition there for him. Brilliant guy, Nate Walser is his name. And we're still good friends. He owns another brewery in town now. And we had been, the kind of home brews we had done were not amber ales and wheat beers. Like, we were making, big imperial stouts and huge IPAs and fruit beers and all kinds of stuff. So that's what we wanted to do. And at the time we were just making them. We wanted to make our tap room have some options. I had mentioned Bell's. You would go down to Bell's and their brewery would have stuff that you couldn't get on the shelves. And, meanwhile at Founders, we were selling the same beers that you put in your 6-packs, and there was nothing special about it. There was no reason for people to come to us. And so we wanted to change that. We wanted to, get some of those beers. Some of those early beers were breakfast stout, Red's Rye, Dirty Bastard. And one of the first things we was try to fix the IPA, just kind of bump up that hop character that the people like us were starting to crave.
But Jeremy, interrupt me. Was Dirty Bastard then your recipe back in the days when you started?
I'm going to give that one to Nate. That was kind of his baby. Funnily, Mike and Dave wanted they kind of had that name before we had the beer developed. They wanted a Dirty Bastard beer, and we're like, okay, well, what does that say to us? And so Nate went and he made this, this big ass Scotch ale, and obviously Scotch ales were not a big seller back in the early 2000s. I mean, they're still not, honestly, to tell you the truth, but that beer and others, like, some of those other big beers were really what got people's attention, and they were different. They were out there. Started putting Founders on people's tongues, especially as people started to explore craft and find new, interesting options.
And I think, we've always kind of looked at Dirty Bastard as the beer that saved the brewery in a way. As it's been told, it's, the beer that finally got into the public, where people started coming through the door saying, hey, we need to try that Dirty Bastard beer. So, it was really proving at that point that the change was necessary and that people wanted different things. And once we started doing different things, the community around Grand Rapids responded. So it's a good thing you guys started making beer like that. So, Jeremy, is it Dirty Bastard and Porter the only two beers that survive in the current lineup that were the initial beers?
Well, Dirty Bastard was on Nate's watch. If you want to go back to original, Porter existed before we started. We did make some tweaks to the recipe. And that might be it.
Yeah, that might be it, right?
Yep. Well, it was a different time then. Now it's all about what's your craziest hoppy thing or barrel aged. Nobody really cares about.
Hell, we weren't even called Founders back then, right? It was Canal Street Brewing Company.
Right.
What was the name?
Canal Street Brewing Company.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Canal Street. That's good. Yeah. Okay, now I think we have to jump into the first beer. But the first question is already here for you, Jeremy. Gabriela is asking, what is the name of your band where you're playing? Where you're still playing? Can they found them? I don't know. In Spotify.
Are you on Spotify, Jer?
Well, let's be honest. I'm an amateur musician, and I have several projects that I like to do. I don't, probably my favorite project right now is a band that I started with my wife, who's a fabulous rock and roll vocalist. And we had been we've been in cover bands and do different projects, but we finally started a band together, writing our own songs. And it's called Mama K and the Cosmic Sway.
So Gabriela, there's the answer.
There you go.
Try to find it.
What are you guys drinking first?
Yeah, I would say we're gonna start. And you are, I would say, one of the founder of session IPAs, and so it took you a while to get the recipe on point. And so I would say let's start with this beer and explain us why it took you so long to get the recipe on point.
Yeah,
and the funny thing was, back in the days, there was not really a reference, because you have to define the flavor of a session IPA. But let's brew it.
Yeah, I kind of like I like brewing like that when there's not a style you're trying to hit. It was I struggle a lot because I make a beer that doesn't fit into a style, and then salespeople have to explain that beer to somebody else, and they're like, "What is it? What style is it?" I'm like, "I don't know. It doesn't have a style." But this one came together.
Cool. So
with all the IPA, I always tell people when I joined the brewery in 2013, that was kind of the first year it was getting released outside of kind of a test batch seasonal release, and we put into our wholesalers, and I used to work in Pennsylvania and upstate New York for Founders, and we put enough beer into them to get them through a summer season, and then John Belgian and Stockertown started calling up Dana and I, Jeremy, and saying, hey, I've sold all that beer. And we're like, what do you mean? You just got it 4 weeks ago. That was supposed to last you a summer. And then, then rapidly we found a way to make it year round. And the response, even back, in the middle of 2000 teens, it was really, really amazing to see. I think the thing that, look, if I was talking about other breweries and beers I was drinking back then as somebody who drinks craft beer, I was looking at living out there. Victory used to make a 5% pale ale called Headwaters, which was damn good. And I found myself not looking to drink 7 or 8% IPAs or double IPAs. So, I think you had the right instinct in trying to get the ABV on this down with still maintaining a full flavored IPA, right? Could you share a bit, Jared, that 3-year journey in getting it right?
Yeah, from 2009 until 2012, it took you. And by the way, Gabriela already found the band.
She did? Oh, wow.
Yeah, she already found it.
I know what I'm listening to.
You got a new fan from Austria, or maybe more.
Oh, I love it. So, innovation was a little different back then. These days, with the industry is just changing so rapidly and trends really come and go quickly. But back then it wasn't really like that. I didn't have a gun to my head about get this beer ready. We got to get to market. It wasn't that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It started off purely selfish, really. We were all drinking Centennial, which I think we're going to have here in a little bit, but that's a 7+% alcohol beer. And that just catches up with you, man. You have a couple of those, maybe as you're having a lunch meeting, and then, maybe a couple after work, and you're kind of worthless the rest of the evening. You lost your motivation. It was getting hard on everybody, but we were all addicted to American hops and IPA in general. And we just said, can we get that satisfaction from those hops and a lower ABV beer, something sessionable, something that, when you're sitting around, drinking a case of Budweiser with your buddies and everyone's fine. Something low, something that's more well-balanced, hop forward, but that you can drink a lot of. So that was the idea there. But it was a lot easier said than done when it really came time to dial in this recipe. And like I said, there's no gun to my head, so I wasn't brewing and fresh batch every week. We're just trying different things, and there were some cool new hop varieties starting to come on the scene. Things like Amarillo and Simcoe had kind of been released in the last couple years, and they were different from any of the public varieties that we were used to. So I wanted to incorporate something like that. But finding that balance between the hop bitterness and enough body without having a cloying sweetness that you can kind of get as you try to increase body in a beer. I just didn't want it to get too thin and bitter on the tongue, because those beers have their place. I do love me a good West Coast IPA, but the intention of this beer was more balanced, something that's doesn't finish too bitter, so that you can actually, enjoy another one. But getting that balance down. So we ended up leaning pretty heavily on just some adjuncts like oats and wheat and corn and things that kind of though they ferment all the way dry, they leave behind almost like an implied body, mouthfeel to it. So it can counterbalance the bitterness without having any of like crystal malt sweetness or something like that. And then dialing in that bitterness where it's there. It's definitely IPA, but in check with the level of body and malt character that's left. And then just finding the right combination of hops. And like I said, we settled on Simcoe Amarillo. They were, kind of featured in the dry hop. And we tried a lot of different iterations, tried all kinds of different hop combinations and different malt combinations. But when this version of the recipe, I knew, and we all knew like that's it. And now we didn't know it was going to do what it did, but we knew that we had something pretty good on our hands. And like John alluded to, it started off as a summer seasonal beer. We were going to throw out the summer and see what happens. And it took off like wildfire, and we could not stop making it.
And so the yeast was also something difficult to define. The yeast
is just our house ale yeast. It's an American strain. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's nice and clean, neutral.
I like that. I like this American yeast we use. It doesn't impart much of its own character. Very neutral. Really lets the malt and the hops do all the talking. So it does its job and kind of gets out of the way. I think that works well for this style.
And Jonathan, all day IPA, percentage of the whole production of Founders.
Yes, so that's floating right around about 70 to 75% of what we're selling. Some markets are different, right? If you go, America's a large country, right? So if you go to the West or you go down South, that might change a bit, but the average is about 70% of everything we're selling. And a lot of that is driven by, we're not necessarily seeing the package over here in Europe, but a lot of it's driven by our 15 pack, which was a little bit of innovation we did in 2014. I think we can credit Bob Kaiser. We used to work for Founders for creating that package. And, we set a really nice price point on a beer. At that time, you were looking about $1 a beer. And it hit into grocery in really strong grocery regions for us. And it was just, people started ordering it by the pallet instead of the case. So, I think it was a combination of right beer, innovation at the right time. And then, Founders and the guys who were leading our sales at that point were real smart about getting it into where it needed to be. So it grew really rapidly from 2013 through 2017. I mean, if you look at some of our sales figures, some of those years, we were just doubling production in some of those earlier years of the beer, year over year. And no one was doing that at that time. We just were kind of watching it going, what is it gonna like? We thought it was just had to stop at a point, and then it just didn't for a while. And it still grows. The bottom line now is that All Day IPA is the #1 selling session IPA globally. We can say that globally now with our global sales. So,
congratulations.
Yeah, it's the horse we kind of never knew we needed, and we didn't expect to do this, right?
Okay, cool. So how big was the production last year overall of Founders?
We were just shy of about 900,000 barrels, right, Jared? In 2020, right?
No, just shy of 600,000, I think it was.
600,000, sorry.
No.
Yeah, the phenomenon of all. Oh, sorry.
We have capacity for 900,000, right?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
I was just gonna say that before All Day there was no flagships. So people talk about, you know, a lot of breweries will start with a flagship beer that they're known for, that they put out there, and then kind of everything else supports it. Well, you know, Founders kind of got to a certain level of not having it. We, you know, our best sellers were Centennial Ipa and Dirty Bastard. Each one of those probably, you know, 20% of our portfolio. So we kind of grew with a round portfolio of various brands and really kind of built the brand rather than a beer. And then then we were in a pretty, you know, a solid spot infrastructure wise when All Day started to take off. Now we had to grow really fast, and we bought a lot of capacity, and you know, held on to our butts as we were, you know, like John said, double in production every year. But it was a different way to go about it. You know, I think that, you know, look at other big breweries that got to our size. You know, Sierra Nevada got there with pale ale. You know, that's what they came out with, and New Belgium had Fat Tire. But you know, we didn't have that right from the get go. That didn't come until, you know, 10 years into our existence. So kind of a different way to go about it. And I don't know if you're going to see that again in our industry or not, but it was wild.
That's true. So there's a
gentlemen,
point coming out now, because normally we're talking about beer and food combinations. And now there's a guy, he's called Manfred, and he says, today will be a good option to talk about beer and music. So which or what kind of music fits perfectly to All Day IPA?
I mean, hey, like anything that is, you know, art-based, and beer can be a bit of art and a bit of science combined, right? I think it's quite subjective. Look, I live up here. I live up in Copenhagen, as you know, Marcus, right? So beer and metal go really well together here. And I think that if I had
to... Do you think it worked also with All Day session, or are there...
Look, I think whatever you like to drink while you're enjoying music, and I hate to give kind of a half-hearted answer and not nail it down, but look, we sponsor, Founders sponsors Bonnaroo, is one of the sponsors of Bonnaroo, a giant music festival in Tennessee. And that's a hippie jam band kind of festival. And look, when I was living in New York and Philadelphia, some of the most hardcore punk clubs and rock and roll clubs were serving all day. So, and you know, same goes across Europe. We got places that, you know, play any different kind of music you can imagine, selling all day IPA. So I think it's more about the, you know, the experience of enjoyment. And I think you know, we spend a lot of time in the beer industry talking about, oh, the beer in the glass, and what are the hops, and what are these things. And I think one of the important things to remember is that beer exists as a social instrument, right? It's designed to be a bit of a social lubricant, something that you take at the end of the day to, you know, make your back hurt less, or the worry a little less, or open up so you can have a conversation with your friends and your neighbors at the pub. And I think we're best served by always remembering that. And I think music falls right in line with that. So I think it's the experience that the liquid then brings you to, more than trying to nail down a type of music for it.
It's a fair point. It's a really fair point. Manfred, maybe you have some suggestions to us. What do you think fits, in your opinion, great with All Day IPA? Manfred is writing a CCR beer, rock and roll, so that's something.
CCR, yeah. Hey, I'm a Creedence fan. I can listen to Creedence with my all day, no problem.
Yeah, and for me, it's also, you know, it's really, as Jeremy explained us, you know, you come home after a day or during a day, you know, want something flavorful and which still is drinkable, you know, and not too intense ABV wise. Then it's a perfect all day beer, you know, and the name of the beer, it's to the point.
Yeah, and look, you know, and I know we're going to move on to Centennial here in a minute, but All Day's been such an absolute success and endearment to us that as of last year, we've started to expand on All Day IPA and the All Day family, right? So last year we came out with All Day Vacay, which was a session wheat beer.
Okay.
Coming in at 4.6%. And like Jeremy said earlier in the chat, it was kind of one of these things where it's a beer without a style almost. I mean, you kind of created the beer and, you got to put it into a style. I'm trying to explain what session weed is to people is virtually nearly impossible once they taste the beer. So, we love all day so much. We started giving it brothers and sisters. So I'm talking about the all day family now, Jer. And then we expanded that again this year to include earlier in the year all day haze. So we've made our first commercially produced hazy beer that's in the spirit of all day. And we're going to have all day vacay coming back out again this summer. And I wouldn't be shocked if you were to see another variant of that somewhere down the line as well. Jared, I'll let you talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, the concept being session beer is an important thing for us. It's kind of funny that we cut our teeth on big ass beers like Dirty Bastard, Breakfast Stout, KBS. That's what we got known for. But it was the other end of the spectrum that really drove the volume and the business in general. So we're kind of known for that. So we're embracing it, and while not these beers are not all going to be variations of an all day, but yet carry on the spirit and the things that make all day special, that balance of flavor, that sessionability, that low alcohol, that easy drinking, and apply those to other things. So the vacay, just a great summertime wheat beer with some citrus character in there. They designed that beautiful can. And that was kind of an inspiration to me. It's nice, driving down the beach, and I'm thinking about the beach. What would I love to drink as I'm sitting on the beach looking at this beauty? And that's kind of where the beer came from. And then the hazy, that's a style that one of my personal favorites. I'm a little old school, I suppose. I do like my beers to be beautifully clear and crisp and clean, and but I've come around to at least appreciate some examples of the style, and I think we landed in a pretty good spot where it's still tastefully done in the spirit of all day. It is again under 5% and has a pleasant balance between all the flavors going on. We did have to put some citra hops into this hazy one because you can't make hazy beers without citra hops in it, apparently.
But it's still also then in the US, that the demand of hazy beers, hazy IPAs is still growing, huh?
Yeah, I would say so. Maybe it's not as rampant as it was over the last few years. I don't think they're going to go out of style, but like with all trends, I think consumers probably thinking about what's next or what can you do to make these hazies different. There's a pretty short attention span here in America, but maybe this session, a session hazy will get it done, because it's most of the hazies so hazy started at like really small breweries that will just sell out of their brewery the day they package it. Everyone goes home, drinks it really fresh. When it comes time to try to like a brewery of our size and others that try to go national with distribution, the beer handles differently, it ages differently, so we kind of have to take that into account, and we can't make hazy beer like the pub down the street can make it and sell it out of their tap room. It's not possible. So we did the best we can to learning about how to make a stable haze was an adventure for me. It was one of those things where you have to unlearn everything that you had learned in your career and do it the opposite. So it was pretty weird, but I think we're in a good spot, and I do see the science behind it. The mouthful is definitely more full and round, and I do believe that keeping some of those proteins in suspension will give the hop oil something to latch onto, and it does seem to have a more a different kind of hop character, where it's the aroma is more intense, the hops seem rounder and fruitier. Yeah, I've come around.
I can taste this beer soon. So really,
yeah. Well, we made a judgment call, Marcus, on not to export the all day haze this year.
But I'm going to the States, so I'm pretty sure I will find it there. So.
You may not. When Jeremy says we made a stable haze, that still only means that it had a 90-day shelf life.
But that's the hop's fault.
Yeah. So,
okay, guys.
You want to move on to Centennial?
Yes. Let's try the next one.
And this delightfully large can we're commercializing. We got 19.2 ounce cans here, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Yes.
The bombas.
Love it.
I love this package. This package is a winner.
But it's kind of new for us here in Austria,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's. We want to talk about
0.5, which we can find. 0.5 is.
You want to talk more about the beer than the package, but we did send it to a couple markets overseas, and some places it worked, other places it didn't. That package was mainly for convenience stores in America, for your 7-Elevens and such, to be able to, that want to commercialize something that's 568 milliliters of beer. So,
cheers.
Cheers, guys. So Centennial IPA, this is our, as Jeremy said, before we had all day, this was our lead beer. This was probably, what we were selling the most of, as IPAs always drive the markets. It's 7.2%, really delicious in my opinion. I'll be really candid. I like this better than like all the IPA. I'm a really traditionalist when it comes to my IPAs. I like West Coast style IPAs. That's what this is. In fact, I think somebody had told me, Marcus, and you're a certified beer judge. I heard that the BMCJ said that this was a perfect example of the West Coast IPA. Mm-hmm. Something we're doing different is all Centennial hops, right? So you get that really piney, really resinous, high alpha acid quality of the hops, and then and again, I'm not a brewer, but there's. And
the funny thing is that this style is getting now popular again. That everyone is asking now again for West Coast style IPAs.
Yeah, Centennial's seen some pretty good growth in the last couple of years, just as like an anomaly to the hazy craze, and Centennial's having some of its best days. So that's pretty fun. When we made Centennial back in the day, Centennial hops were the IPA hops. This was before there was any, Simcoe, Citron, any of those things. It's you made your pale ale with Cascade, and you made your IPA with Centennial, and that's the way it was. Those were the hops you had. But I love it. I still love the Centennial hop. I love that floral, like John said, pininess of it. It's just, it's pleasant to me. This particular style is maybe a little more malt forward than a lot of the really yellow, dry West Coast. But I think that, that balance,
the malt character, the malt body helps the beer itself.
Yeah, for me, that's what I was getting at before. Is that for me, that's the thing about this beer, is that the malt bill you built on this thing, Jeremy, is incredible. For it to be able to stand up to how hoppy this beer is, and just provides some nice sweetness, nice round sweetness to it. This is just a beautiful beer, day in, day out.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, 65 IBUs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the sweet spot for 7%. But yeah,
was not founded under you because it was already existing, if I understood it right. It was already when you joined Founders.
They had an IPA, and it was made with Centennial hops. But the first thing that I begged Nate to do as brewer was let's make this IPA awesome, because it was fine. It was a well-crafted, clean beer, but it wasn't as bright and aggressive and in your face as IPAs were starting to become. So we overhauled the recipe. We changed some dry hop techniques about it. We started dry hopping this beer during fermentation, which is kind of known today as biotransformation, and it's a real thing. It it changed the character You can't wait till your beer is done and cold to put hops in it and get that same character. You got to get them in while it's active, while it's still warm and there's plenty of activity in there. So that was the big thing that kind of changed this beer for the better. And we rebranded it as Centennial IPA because IPA just didn't have enough pizzazz to it, so we gave it a name. And I still name all my beers like that. You can tell when it's a beer that I name because it's like Centennial IPA or Azaka IPA or Mosaic Promise, Porter. Now we have a marketing team that likes to, put fancier names on these things. But if you ever see a name that's just telling you what it is based on the ingredients,
and the name is from you, Jeremy. Okay. So maybe you haven't heard us before, because normally we are talking about beer and food pairing, but now some guys came out with the idea to talk about music and beer pairing. So Jonathan and I, we discussed a little bit about all day IPA, and that beer is something social, brings people together, also music. And now there's a guy coming out, Manfred. Perfect pairing with Centennial IPA is Carlos Santana. So maybe, Jeremy, you have kind of a favorite music which fits, in your opinion, because it's the same with food, it's more or less how we feel and what we feel or what we think goes well with Centennial IPA, music-wise.
I'm gonna try Carlos Santana later on. I do like that. Music and beer definitely go together awesome, and there's a tie there. I remember back when we were much smaller and getting started, there was only a few of us working there, and we were just grinding it out. There was a lot of Black Sabbath that got played in that brew house. That carried us through quite a few years. So there's always a special spot in my heart for Black Sabbath and some of the original Founders beers. But these days it gets pretty diverse. I hear a lot of Motown going on around there. If you want some energy music, classic rock and roll it pretty much still rules the day though around Founders.
Black Sabbath and Carlos Santana with Centennial IPA.
I love it.
So why not? Let's give it a try.
Jeremy, maybe we need to get some of the marketing people to start putting musical pairings along with the beers out there, right? We talk about our food pairings. Why not?
I like that.
But is this something you guys are doing at the brew pub? Food pairing? Is this something which is really focused? Or is it more or less, if people want to get the choice from the staff side, then they can get it? Or is it something really in the menu you're going to play around with beer and food?
Our education team spends some time working on those things, and they make those available to the salespeople. I think that's where a lot of the requests come is, right, salespeople, I got a beer dinner, or people just want to know what to pair it with. So we put some effort into that, but don't really push it internally much beyond that. Okay.
So also in the tap room, you get some finger foods, or there is some kind of food, but not really kind of beer and food pairing.
Yeah, we have some beer. We have some, if you come to our tap room, and it's definitely worth a trip to Grand Rapids to come see us. And for many other reasons, Grand Rapids is an amazing city, right in the middle of America. We do have some interesting food pairings in beer, food that has kind of been designed around the beer. One of my favorites I always think about is when I first started at Founders, we had a guy working there that used to work for me named, you remember Anthony Liberta? Yeah, sure. So Mr. Liberta, he took it upon himself to try the Devil Dancer combo. So, and for those who don't know what Devil Dancer is, it's a triple IPA, 10%, 10 different kinds of hops, Jared, a bunch of different malt. It's a mess to make in the brew house. But then we have a sandwich which is unbelievably spicy that goes with this beer, because worse, triple IPA, what else do you want to eat with it besides face melting spicy sandwich? And so he eats this thing and he drinks it, and he's drinking the Devil Dancer and eating the sandwich, and by the end I thought he was gonna stroke out on us. He was sputtering and sweating and bright red, looked like he'd crossed the desert with no water. And that's an extreme idea, but it is true that IPAs do pair really well with spicy food.
Yeah.
So
That's clear, and I completely agree. And I would say now we're gonna move into the dark side of this tasting.
Dark side.
The dark side. First gonna be breakfast stout.
Nice.
This is the first Founders beer I ever drank.
It was?
Yeah, and it was way before I was even working at Founders too. And not to derail us, but a friend of mine had picked me up to go snowboarding up in Vermont when I was living in New York City. I was working for Rogue at the time, Jeremy, and he had gone out. He had went to university in Ohio, and he had come back from a trip out to his old university and came back with a case of breakfast stout and picked me up in New York City, and we drove up to Vermont. But let's just say the 4-pack he had might not have made it. Might have been gone by the time we made it up there. Maybe not the best choices, but that I was blown away at the time about just what you were doing with this beer. And I think that was probably 2007, Jeremy. And working for Rogue, which was another brewery that was known for kind of making big beers or being a little bolder. This thing really knocked my socks off. And I think that's what we talked about earlier in the call, and I'll use that to dovetail the idea of, this was a beer that Founders kind of really got known for regionally. People did go gray market it to other places and go drive out and bring it back to the East Coast or other West Coast states because you couldn't get it. Right? And I think at that time, it's just this combination of 2 types of coffee, 2 types of chocolate. Obviously those things lend themselves to stout really well, but this was something special when I had it the first time. Every time I have it, it still doesn't fail to stand the hair up on the back of my neck. And I'll never forget one of the first times I came into the brew when you guys were making it, and the whole place just reeked of coffee and chocolate. I mean, I think it's a labor intensive beer, right?
Extremely. It's one of those beers that was not designed for mass production. It was like I talked about, us making beers for the tap room. That was my plan. That's where this came from. This is straight from a homebrew recipe that me and Nate did before we were founders too. So making it the brew day is amazing, right? You're melting chocolate and you're steeping coffee and everything's a mess, but it smells amazing, and you got like twice as much work to do as a normal brew. But it's awesome because it's just so rewarding. Everybody loved this beer. But and then of course it became let's put that in bottles and send it out to the world. And I was like, whoa, wait a second. What have I done? This beer is not something that can be easily done on a regular basis. And well, we figured it out, and it's still obviously more labor intensive than some other beers of ours, but we got to figure it out, and we kept the quality of the beer, where we wanted it. And this was it kind of invented a style, right? I had coffee beers, coffee stouts, and I had chocolate stouts, but just kind of tying it all together and thinking about how well those flavors play together in a stout. And it was there wasn't anything like it at the time. It was awesome.
And double chocolate coffee oatmeal stout. So wasn't it tricky in the beginning to use chocolate? Because I know that a lot of brewers are struggling to use chocolate, because it's intense. It gets these fat proteins, which are really not easy to handle. So were you struggling with this in the beginning to scale it up from the homebrew?
Nope. We kind of had figured it out at the homebrew level, the kinds of chocolates that we wanted to incorporate. So, they're both, one is a dark bittersweet, and the other is a basically an unsweetened chocolate liqueur melted into little discs. So there's not a lot of milk fat going on in these things. It's not a lot of it's not sweet chocolate. It's more of an underlying, richness with that cocoa flavor. So, we do it hot side, it ferments out, and yeah, I would call the chocolate maybe more on the subtle side than, if I were to say, hey, here's my chocolate beer, I would probably go a different avenue. But the way the key to breakfast stout is trying to balance all those flavors together.
Who came out with the label? Was it you back in the days? Were you able?
We used to work with a guy. He did all of our early labels. And that one was one of his favorites, and it certainly struck a chord with us. It kind of became iconic. It actually had some legal problems.
Really iconic, because in Austria I can say it's not really long on the market, but often this beer with this ugly baby face, that's something people connect to this. Yeah. When they see the label, this ugly baby face.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that it's still existing, that kind of speaks for the brand and speaks for the company, because normally, I don't know, when was the beer founded? In which year?
That was probably 2002. That was like right when that was the first thing. Mm-hmm. That was one of the first brews that we made for Special Tap Room. And it wasn't long after that Mike and Dave were like, we want to put these kind of beers in bottles. So maybe 2003, but I bet it was 2002, but by the end of that year.
And this, like I said, this beer really became a cult classic in not just Founders history, but American craft beer history. This is something that, was just one of those benchmark beers that people strove to find if they couldn't get it in their home market. And much like the beer, the label's got a bit of a cult following too. It's not legal in some places. We actually, one of the really funny stories about this is somewhere down the line, maybe, after selling it for 12 years, we might have realized that it wasn't registered in the state of Michigan. And the state of Michigan kind of came to us and said, hey, you might have an issue with this. We need you to work on it with us. And if you don't, then we can talk about the 12 years we know you've been selling it in the state. So for 1 year, there was actually a secondary label in the state of Michigan where the baby was gone. Okay. The bowl of cereal was on the table, and in the refrigerator behind him, there was a Post-it note, and there was a phone number on the Post-it note. And if you called the phone number, you got an away message, an answering machine with the baby saying, "Hey, I've gone on vacation." And we got some really, really interesting messages on this machine because it would take a voicemail. And at one point there was floating around a clip of some guy who just dropped like 94 F-bombs telling us how great the beer was, and that and some other ones stood out. And for our international business, I might have run afoul of the Swedish government on this label. We can't send this label into Sweden. We have to give them a different label.
Because that's a question I want to ask you, Jonathan. How is it in Europe? Is it possible to sell it across Europe, or is it also kind of like what you guys faced in Michigan?
No. So the only people that ever really complain about any of our labels are the Swedes.
Okay.
I've never had any other regulatory issues.
But the reasons are the design or the
packaging. They're definitely not happy that there's an alleged baby. I've had some interesting banter with them throughout the years about our labels, and I said, prove to us that this is a baby, right? Maybe it's something else. Is there beer in that cereal bowl? We don't know. Then I think if you look at our Backwoods Bastard label, I'll share another one. They said, well, sorry, you can't have the Backwoods Bastard label in Sweden because it's got an axe on it, and that's a weapon. Okay. And I said, wait a minute. Oh, well, hold on, guys. This thing isn't a weapon. It's a tool. He's out there chopping down trees. And if it was a weapon, there'd be blood on the axe. And let's just say they didn't like that response very much. Yeah. So we've had to make some label changes here and there, mostly for the Swedes. We love them.
But mostly with Sweden.
Yeah, we love them, but they can be a little touchy, right?
Jeremy, there's a guy asking if this beer contains caffeine. Is caffeine that because it okay.
It does. Yeah, we get it. We've had it tested. It's not as much as a cup of coffee, but it's definitely there. If you if you back when I was younger, my friends and I would get on occasion, we would get an entire keg of breakfast stout and have breakfast stout parties where that's all we would drink. And one of the byproducts of that is definite. You can feel the caffeine. You'll keep going.
But below, you don't have to put it on the label.
Not yet. Not yet. There will probably be some labeling overhaul in my lifetime of the FDA wanting those things on there. But currently we don't have to list it. But you can find it on the website. We test that for all those beers.
Okay. So Bernard, that's the answer. You can find all the information on their website about the caffeine content of this beer. And then before we really go into this really intense black beers, music, is there a song which goes perfectly with breakfast stouts, even when you had back in your younger days festivals with only kegs of breakfast stout, Jeremy?
This might be one of those Black Sabbath moments that I was talking about.
I was thinking about this. Yeah.
No, really, it was the brew day is pretty intense, and especially back then, when we were we had to develop.
Was not there, it was not developed back then.
Yeah, it was a lot of work, but it was fun, and Sabbath got us through, and knowing that we were making something that, man, we were all going to really enjoy drinking eventually.
Is there a nitro version out of this breakfast stout available in the States, or maybe sometimes nitro brown?
There is a nitro version, and Marcus, it's not just available in the States, Marcus. I think we could probably bring it out to you.
Okay. So then also in Europe.
Yeah, I think we've shipped it occasionally on special request for people. Nitrogen draft lines are becoming more popular in the craft bars.
Yeah.
So we do have it. We've had nitrogen versions of KBS as well, and we've done some nitro CBS. We used to make a nitro oatmeal stout, which we don't export anymore, which I'm very sad about because I love that beer, the dry stout jar. So yeah, it is available on nitrous, Marcus. Okay. And it's beautiful on the nitrogen. It really kind of changes the presentation of the beer. You get that smaller nitrogen bubble in the beer. It's really nice and soft. It really lends itself pretty well to the process.
Cool.
What else have we done on nitrogen? Rubaeus.
Yeah, we do stouts and fruit beers mainly. Yeah. And we've tried some hobby beers. They're interesting. That's not really what I like. I like my hobby beers to be more crisp. And I know the English people.
Did we do nitro pale ale? 5 years ago, we made nitro pale ale for a while, Jer.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, not my favorite, but
no.
Manfred is mentioned. His music choice is Janis Joplin, because it's really relaxed beer. You really can sit down, enjoy it together with Janis Joplin.
You should know that my wife, who I already spoke of as a rock star singer, actually fronts a Janis Joplin cover band, and she is dynamite. That is not an easy performer to impersonate, if you will.
Yeah.
Man, she is good. It takes a lot out of her. You get about an hour of it, and then she's pretty spent, but it's a sight to see.
So then next time, listen to her with breakfast stuff.
Did I come across something you guys singing me and Bobby McGee online? Maybe you had shared it on your Facebook or something. Jared?
Maybe, yeah. There's stuff out there of it. Yeah,
I'm recalling it now as being absolutely incredible.
So
moving on to KBS, huh?
Yes.
The only beer that actually bears your name on it, Jeremy, right?
I think it still does. Yeah.
Yeah, it still does. Well, I think we're all sitting with the older label. This beer got a label update this year, and I think it's still got your name on it, but
it might have stayed. Yeah, it might have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Well, let me tell you the roots of KBS. So it was pretty early in the days. It was early 2000s. We had developed breakfast stout already, and it was a big internal hit, at least, and starting to gain some legs out in the wider world. But another side project that came about was getting a couple of used bourbon barrels. There was a guy named Tom Griffith that used to come around, and he would deliver. He would go to down south, come back with a trailer truck load of bourbon barrels and go and peddle them to all the local breweries. So, and most people buy a couple just for experimentation. So we got 2 of them our first year. And we, when you got to pick a beer to put into these bourbon barrels, we went with breakfast stout. We thought that would be a good addition to anybody that appreciates breakfast and maybe a little extra with their breakfast. So it became the Kentucky breakfast stout. That's what KBS originally stood for. And so it took we waited a year. We found that it was about a year before we were really getting some of those awesome barrel characters come through. What we found though at that first experiment was the chocolate and the coffee had faded away pretty far. And the beer through the barrel aging process kind of it come out more thin. I think that as it gains alcohol from the aging, really kind of thinned out the body a little bit. So we made some tweaks to that base beer, which became KBS. So kind of an imperialized version of breakfast stout. We had to up that coffee, up that chocolate, and up the whole gravity in general so that it finished with a little more body and a little more alcohol. And so the next year we bought, I think, 4 bourbon barrels, and we put this base beer into it and waited a year. And sure enough, it came out pretty awesome. It had kind of all the concerns we had with just breakfast out in there had been alleviated. And I think the next year we bought 8 bourbon barrels, and that was about enough to put it in bottles.
But you always get them super fresh, huh? That was kind of the thing, they were still wet and.
Yeah, that's the key. Yeah, there's a lot of factors involved there in picking the right barrels. But we didn't really know much back then, other than
back in the days, yeah, of course.
If you put the beer in it and it didn't leak out all over the place, you were in good shape. But this was still mid 2000s, and I remember putting this beer in 4-packs. And we didn't send it out for distribution. We sold it in our tap room. We had a to-go cooler where, everybody used a to-go cooler, but this beer just kind of sat there in the to-go cooler. And, it was a $6 4-pack or whatever. Or probably $10 4-pack, whatever it was. It was way too cheap.
Super cheap.
It was way too expensive for people that had just come to the cooler to buy some to-go beer. And then they were like, stout, barrel aged.
What the fuck?
So it sat there. I mean, it's kind of remarkable to think about, what became of that beer, but nobody really got it at first. And then it was the dawning of Beer Advocate, Rate Beer, these beer rating sites, and the dialogue between these beer nerds, which I call them very, very affectionately, and I'm sure they appreciate that too. But that's kind of what really got the chatter going. And then all of a sudden, like one year, there's a line around the building waiting to buy this KBS on release day, and we were like, "What the hell
is going on?
Why are there people lined up outside the door before we're open?" That was a new thing for us. And man, it just grew and grew and grew, and every year it got to be a little more of a tricky situation where, people showing up to camp the night before and they just sit up all night drinking beer, on the street around the building. And we have a good relationship with our local municipality, and the police were like, this can't happen. We appreciate you guys and what you do, which people can't be out just drinking open intox on the street throughout the night till the next morning.
And camping and waiting for a beer.
Camping on the street. And it was, I'm sure a lot of fun for those guys, but I'm sure it was a big mess, and there was sure illegal things happening. And so anyways, we made a lot of steps to kind of streamline that process so that more people got the beer. The other thing was, you wait at the end of the line, and we didn't know how many people are going to show up, and the people at the back of the line, maybe there's not so much KBS left by the time they get up there, and then they're mad and everyone's mad. And so those were some of the struggles of those early days. And we really invested in the barrel age capacity, and got to the point where, I want people to be able to get KBS, and I know that it became a thing where, maybe some of the beer nerds lost a little interest at the result of that, they can get it more easily. I think that there's something about that chase that really does it.
And always the point then, when you pull up the production, it's getting more and more available, then people, especially these beer geeks, they lost the interest in it,
I can get it now without chasing a truck down. I don't want it anymore. So shit.
But if I wrote right, it was 2004. It was voted as the second world's best beer. Do you remember what was number one back in the days, 2004?
I think it was Pliny the Elder.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe it was the West Vlerton 12. That was
yeah. It can be. It was West Vlerton 12. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan, sorry to interrupt you.
No, I just to Jeremy's point about how you grow up into something. If I duck out of the screen here, you'll see my background is actually that's our barrel aging cave mine. Jeremy, you want to talk a little bit about how we grew up into that and what you guys are rocking and rolling with down there?
Yeah, sure. So, as I said, we started with 2 barrels, and then to 4, and then to 8. By the time we doubled it again the next year, or tripled it, or whatever we did, we're kind of running out of room to put these things. We didn't have a lot of storage facility at our place. So fortunately, Mike and Dave, our owners, had contacts with this guy these used to be gypsum mines. So back in the 50s, they would mine a lot of gypsum down there. That kind of that industry dried up a bit, but there was all this natural storage down there. It's called Michigan Natural Storage, and it's all temperature and humidity controlled, 100 feet below the Earth's surface. Ideal situation for aging these barrels. Really low humidity, so you're not going to get a lot of evaporation. Holds a constant temperature. There's a lot of debate about that. There's a lot of brewers that will age their barrels at a warmer temperature, and the effect will happen a lot quicker. You'll extract the barrel character in much less time. I'm of the opinion that beer, once it is finished, wants to be cold, and that is the best way to prolong the life of that beer. Now, oxidation is going to happen in those barrels. That's just part of the process, but at a cooler temperature, it's a much slower, delicate process, and I believe it results in a superior product. So we give it the time at a nice, cool, 45, 50 Fahrenheit. Okay. And I feel like it takes all of a year. It really does. If I got to pull something out at 10 months, I got to have something to blend it with at 14. It's just kind of that, 12 months is the target. And I've kind of found that that's just the way it stands for at least bourbon barrels. As I start to play with other liquor barrels, that changes maybe a little bit. But
okay, but all the KBS which comes out is at least 1 year, and it's always the same year, or you still blend it to get the right kind of flavor?
Yep, a lot of blending going on, especially since we, KBS became a year-round beer for us in the last year. So that was a whole nother hurdle to challenge. It used to be we just 1 year ahead of time. Yeah, you make it all and you give it a year and it's ready. Now we've got to kind of have foresight of how much are we going to need a year from now, and we kind of keep a bank going. And like I said, you can put some 10-month aged with some 14-month aged, and it's going to be there, but. You can't rely on everything less than 12 months. It's not going to be ready.
Okay. Can you tell from which distillery? I guess it's not only one distillery where you get the barrels.
Yeah, we work with
the big ones, because there's a guy who's saying, is it out from Jim Beam? Are you getting barrels from Jim Beam?
Yep, we got some bean barrels. We get a lot of Heaven Hill is a good portion of ours. Buffalo Trace. And occasionally you see some more rare stuff come through. Wild turkeys have been awesome for us. And then there's all different years too. You know, some of those only held whiskey for 3 years. Sometimes you get a barrel that held whiskey for 20 years, and those are absolutely amazing. It really influences how the beer comes out, is how much time the liquor spent in there before that. So that's another part of the blend. You try to get it all in there. There's you just get different character from all those different ages, and the blending has become quite a thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, at this point,
there are guy asking why you putting on the bottling date and not the expiry date.
That's a good question. We've I, as a consumer, I want to know the bottling date. I will make my own decision about how far past that bottling date I'm willing to purchase a beer. I feel like when you put on a expired by date, it's I feel like I can make that own decision for myself. Now, most consumers probably can't. But when you go expiration date, you're kind of committing yourself to buying back a lot of product. I think that when you put a package date on there and you set this is good for 90, 120, 360 days, whatever it is, it still creates that scenario, but I don't feel like it's as drastic as putting an expiration date on there. So things might change.
When you look at other breweries when you look at other breweries markets that are doing this, I see other breweries that have really capable barrel aging programs, and they're putting 5-year or 6-year expiration dates on things to make sure that it allows their consumers to do exactly what Jeremy just said, which is make their own decision. Right? We get a lot of people. That are doing verticals of this and aging it in their bedroom closet for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Yeah. I had a guy show up at an event here in Copenhagen with a 70-year-old bottle of KBS, and we opened it up, and it had quite a bit of oxidation on it at that point. But it
depends also, how you storage the beer. Jonathan, that's
he's got an extra.
Keep the temperature high, as Jeremy mentioned. Keep the temperature low, keep it dark, and then if everything goes right, you can keep the bottle.
Sure. So we're not shy about knowing that there's many different ages of this out there. It's an experience. It's something that is well favored by a lot of our consumers. And honestly, at this point, we're arguably one of the largest, if not the largest, bourbon barrel aging brewery out there, using the majority of our barrels are bourbon barrels. We played around with some tequila barrels, right? I think I've seen some gin barrels that we never let out of the brewery, right, Jer?
Internal stuff.
Yeah, internal stuff.
Also, Firestone is quite big, barrel aging program wise. They make quite a lot of things.
They make a great barrel aged product. They're probably my and this is just my opinion. After Founders, they're probably my favorite brewery doing barrel aged beers in America right now. Their Parabola series, some of their wild beers that they're barrel aged, they're just incredible. And I've hung out with Jeffers from Firestone a couple times, and the guy's a madman. He does an awesome job. So and one of the byproducts of KBS becoming as popular as it is that we've been able to grow in the last couple of years our commitment to barrel aging and come out with some really great other beers that aren't KBS or KBS variants, right? You can talk about Backwoods Bastard is one of the first beers we've ever barrel aged, and for my money, that might be a better beer, which it's barrel aged Dirty Bastard. That might be a better beer to showcase what a bourbon barrel can really do to a beer, because you don't have the adjuncts in there, and you get a really clear picture of the quality of the wood brings to things. You get a lot of vanillin in that beer, the chemical compound that brings a bit of the vanilla flavor that exists in bourbon barrels. You get a lot of the char of the oak in there. If I sound like I'm waxing philosophical, it's because Backwoods Bastard might be my favorite bourbon barrel aged beer we make. But we made just in the last couple of years, we made some Panther Cub. We've made which is a barrel aged imperial porter with maple syrup and vanilla, and of course we talk about CBS, and we've given our brewers and our barrel men pretty much a free range to play around.
That's a good thing, because then it'll always be attractive for them.
Sure, it satisfies a bit of the beer geeks that Jeremy talked about before, that might have sat at the end of that KBS line and got a little grumpy when they couldn't get what they wanted.
But it's also happening to other breweries, and it's still happening, also in the hazy world, when you look to some breweries in New York, people are lining up, camping there, waiting to get, I don't know, one of the freshest release. Also Russian River, they still have to face this kind of problems.
Yeah, and at this point, we're putting out, besides KBS and Backwoods Bastard, we're putting out 4 to 6 different barrel-aged beers a year sometimes. So it's become a veritable playground for, our brewers. And Jeremy, maybe you can talk a bit about this more, but I don't think, your guys want to be making just one thing all the time, right?
Yeah.
No, we like
I completely agree.
Different stuff. I mean, and I'll be honest, there's very few beers that we make that we don't at least at some point try putting in a bourbon barrel and seeing what happens. So that's part of the innovation there, is just experimenting. And gosh, they usually come out pretty great. But not every one of them has legs to be a thing. But that's it's just, and it helps us grow and helps us understand the process and learn more.
I'm starting to have a flashback, Jeremy, to Philly Beer Week a number of years ago when, what was it, bourbon barrel aged on the IPA with hot sauce.
Okay. We got to talk about that one again.
That's a different story. Jonathan, that's a different story. So there's a question coming. Who built the brew house at the new facility in Grand Rapids? So the final brew house, is it a German brew house? It's an American brew house?
Yeah, most of our equipment is German at this point. We're with the Cronus family, so it's a Steinecker. All of our brew houses are Steinecker. Yeah. Yep, they make great stuff.
Yeah, that's true. And especially when it's getting bigger and bigger, then they're really well known to build bigger brew houses. Yeah.
And they grew with us, and we had a lot of specific custom things that we wanted done. And as a growing craft brewery, I think they learned a lot from working with us too about what the craft brewer needs as compared to just a big brewer, right?
Just a big industrial brewer. Yeah. That's true. Cool. So, time for the next
more
BBC
beer
version. Espresso.
Hey, that's what I'm drinking.
Espresso. That's the next one. So that's kind of one of the newest.
Yeah, that was our first variant on a KBS. I suppose I personally had resisted variants for quite a while. Only because I thought KBS was a thing. It was a standalone great beer, and if I wanted more barrel aged beer, I'll just make more barrel aged beers. And I don't love gimmicks. I don't love doing things that aren't completely genuine and full of integrity. And I see a lot of I love our marketing team, but the more the marketing team gets involved, the more we start looking at trends and gimmicks. And to me, that's
understands. I completely.
It's a little, as a traditionalist purist, it's a little weird. But again, I've embraced it. This was the first one we did, and I didn't want to stray too far from the spirit of the original beer. So we kind of took one of those aspects of KBS, being the coffee, and I wanted to just really feature it, take it to the next level. So we work with a local coffee roaster, and they kind of designed us up this espresso at a roast, and when they came out of the barrels, we hit it with a fresh dose of this espresso coffee. And it really took it to the next level, but still, it's still KBS. It's still what people expect out of it. It's just, if you love that, if the coffee is the thing about KBS that really draws you to it, then this beer is for you.
And this had come out, this was actually released last year, the end of last year. And when I had it then, Jer, it was really bright on the espresso, right? And having it now again, haven't had it since, it's definitely rounded out really nice.
Yeah. Maybe a little sharp at first even, right?
Yeah, exactly. It had a bit of almost astringency to it from the espresso.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, Jared, when you guys, and I hate to bait the question, but for sake of a barrel aging conversation, how do you guys, you and Jason and you guys, how do you pick what you're barrel aging? Like, what goes into the thought process when you're trying to develop a new barrel aged beer?
Well, there's a couple different avenues, and one is just the creative brewer. Let's just try some stuff. We know bourbon barrels are great. They're available. They're reliable. We've done a lot with them, so I do look for other
also, sorry to interrupt, also for younger breweries, they are available and reliable, or is it more or less that you kind of one of the founders of the barrel aging program with beer? So do you think it's available also for younger breweries?
The thing about bourbon is that for it to be a bourbon, you can only use that barrel one time. Mm-hmm. Which is different than other spirits. Like when I get my tequila barrels, those things have been used over and over and over and over again until they basically aren't holding liquid that well. And then they're willing to sell it to the brewers. But with the bourbon barrels, they can't use it again. So there's just more of them available. And because of their limited use, they're generally in really good shape. So that's why I say they're reliable and available.
Okay. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's and then aside from us just trying stuff, there's as I talk about marketing, there's a lot more kind of looking at what's going on out there. Where are the opportunities, and maybe focusing innovation in a little bit more of a specific direction rather than randomness. So it's kind of these days a blend of those two concepts of a deliberate market analysis and just straight up brewer experimentation.
Okay. There's a question out from Florian. I don't know how he came on this point, but there's maybe a slogan out of Founders. They don't serve founders in the clique.
It does say that, right? Right on the side of our can.
On the can?
So yeah, not I don't know how obvious we want to be, but the clink is a euphemism in American English for getting thrown in jail when you maybe drive under the influence or allegedly drive under the influence. So it's really just it's a cheeky way of saying, please don't drink our beer and then get behind the wheel of a car. And I think that's
okay.
Yeah, it's a really important thing. And, we take responsibility with alcohol highly serious at Founders, but also inside.
It's not only in the US, It's
no, but it's inside the brewing industry in general.
Yeah, don't drink it.
Whether it's for a public safety or a personal health, tilt to it. Alcohol is meant to be enjoyed responsibly, and we want our fans to enjoy it responsibly.
What means click translated? Car?
Clink is just clink. Yeah, jail. You go to prison. You get thrown. The saying is you get thrown in the clink.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we learn something.
It's just a cheeky way of us, kind of just saying, hey, please be responsible with the stuff we make.
They don't serve founders. The clink. Yeah, in the jail. Yeah, it makes sense.
No,
maybe you can get some hard seltzers. Maybe you can get some hard seltzers.
Yeah, those should be in jail.
Should they?
Oh, really? Was it good to enter? Hard seltzer. Is it still something in the States? Jeremy? You as a brewer, I know what you think about it, but overall, you're living there.
I don't think it's not growing at the rate it was in the last couple of years, or maybe the in general it is, but because there's so many people in the game now, if you're not White Claw or Truly, you're probably struggling. I think we saw an opportunity, had really big eyes. I thought I made a product that was, pretty respectable. But ultimately it's like, there's only so much room on the shelves, and there's only so much capacity of the seltzer buyer to find their brand and go with it. Right?
When you ask me about Europe, I think it will never be a big seller in Europe at all. For sure not. It's kind of disappeared when it started, because there's not really any demand, because still States and Europe is a completely different kind of thing, and people here in Europe, I think they never will go into that kind of.
I've seen some European producers come online. What I can say is with a bit of an insight to the pan-European markets, there is no real explosion or purchase of seltzer becoming, a major force like it did in the USA. Maybe 2 years ago, I would have said yet, but now I'm not certain that it will.
It's not happening, is it?
It's not happening. No. And look, that being said, the ones we have brought over, they got received well. I think the Mas Agave seltzers we've made, they were kind of born out of the idea that we had started fooling around with some tequila barrel aged beers that were imperial gozas with different flavors, and some of those are absolute winners. Our tequila barrel aged beers, they kind of span the gap in a way between cocktail and beer, and then that idea of using syrup.
Now we must make sure that we don't swift out of this tasting.
No. But I'm saying about the seltzer.
But to get a beer drinker or a cocktail drinker into the beer world, or a cocktail drinker or a beer drinker out into cocktails, it's kind of a tricky way.
Yeah, but also then to try to navigate that back into seltzer, right? I think we had a really grand idea. I think we put out a really great product for what it was, and they're still available. They're ever changing, and there's room on the shelf for them. Is it going to be what Founders is going to be known for forever? No, it's not. It's been a great project for us to do.
Because everyone wants to try it, and give it a try, especially the marketing department. I'm pretty sure that we have to bring out someone, at least one.
Look, I don't think there's anyone in the American craft brew space that hasn't played around with the idea because of the popularity, right? You have, Oscar Blues is making seltzer.
Yeah, everyone, all the big players. And the same is happening in Europe, big ones, smaller ones, they were kind of waiting how the market will reflect. But now, after 2 years, we can see it's not really any big demand on it in Europe.
And I think what's interesting about this too is after rapid growth in the American market, these things have kind of plateaued a little bit as well.
Cool. Then I would say, before we move or go on to the next beer, what's our favorite song to KBS Espresso?
Yeah, we need to answer Manfred, right?
I'll let you guys pick this one.
The point is that I'm not really into music, The only thing is I need the background sound, so I turn on the radio. But if you ask me, I know some of those bands or singers, what you guys mentioned, or especially Manfred mentioned. But when you ask me now, KBS Espresso.
I mean, I'm originally from New Jersey, and we love Frank Sinatra. He's got a song called "The Coffee Song." Maybe that's just a bit too on the nose.
Frank Sinatra, Call the Coffee Song.
The coffee song, yeah.
The coffee song.
I'll go with that.
We have a song here in Austria. It's called, but I'm pretty sure that some of our followers know the song, but I don't know who sing it, but it's called Der Kaffee ist fertig. The coffee is ready. So it's kind of a really quiet, old song. But when you ask me now who is singing it, I don't have any idea.
And that might share some, a bit of ubiquitous brain space for an American with the best part of
Working 9 to 5 from Dolly Parton is mentioned from one of the listeners, which could go working 9 to 5 from Dolly Parton.
Oh, yeah.
Dolly Parton working 9 to 5.
Yeah. And my song, it's an Austrian song, Der Kaffee ist fertig. So that's what I can tell the Austrians.
Perfect.
Or the Germans which are following and listening. That's my kind of perfect match with this beer. Cool. So now we can step into the last one, which is then KBS Vanilla. Cinnamon, vanilla, and cocoa.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So this one was kind of inspired by, I went down to Mexico and drinking the Mexican coffee where they put cinnamon and vanilla in there, and I thought, well, that'd be a kind of a fun addition to KBS. Still trying to stay within the bounds of what people might expect out of a coffee beer. So it, again, not easy. Making my cellar team steep cinnamon bark and cocoa nibs, and it's again not easy, but the best things are never easy, so we do it.
It reminds me, first kind of impression is a chai latte. Mm-hmm. That's my first impression.
Good. Yeah, trying to keep the balance. There's a lot of flavors going on there, and of course, a lot of flavors in the original beer that I wanted to respect too. So, I think we did a pretty good job of balancing all those things, and still got a little residual sweetness, a little spiciness, but the KBS base beer still a thing.
Yeah, I made every Christmas I make a bit of Puerto Rican eggnog called coquito. I don't know if you're familiar with what this is, but you can find coquito. You can find recipes online. It's coquito. Yeah, it's condensed milk, evaporated milk, piles of cinnamon, vanilla, and then a good dose of white rum. Probably more white rum than should be allowed in anything. Let me say that I did a bit of this with some floaters of KBS cinnamon vanilla cocoa right on top, and it was delightful.
There you go.
Delightful. Again, this is kind of that, where we were talking about the variants of all day. It's, as we go down the line and we see more variants of KBS, what I think is really, kind of important to remember when we talk about the founders' idea of doing this is that they all really stay true to what the original beers were. And, if we flash back to just a couple quick beers ago, we had breakfast stout, and at the heart of all these beers is breakfast stout, right, Jer?
Yep, indeed.
So, and it is nice. It's, I guess, maybe I'm talking out of turn because I'm not a brewer, but it is nice to play with these flavors and play with the idea of what the beer can be.
Yeah, absolutely. It can get a little daunting as you think about, once you start on variants, as you just keep, you don't stop, right? So can you keep coming up with great ideas that do stay true to the original beer and also are interesting and also, you know, are good, enjoyable to drink. So to me, it's a little daunting knowing that there's no end in sight, but and knowing that I don't want to jump the shark, as an American saying, where, you know, you go too far and you just like, now you've lost it. You've lost the consumer. You lost your respect. I want to make sure we don't go there. So that's my burden to bear.
Yeah, and that restraint and that being true to style and form makes these uniquely Founders beers, right? So, sure. You know, I think you can't swing a dead cat, to use another American saying. You can't swing a dead cat these days without finding a brewery that makes, you know, pastry stout this and pastry stout that, and, you know, Cinnabon malt flavored imperial stout. And look, I've been out in the world with you, Jer, and been at festivals with you, and I can't say how many times we've been approached by other brewers that I'll leave nameless at this point to just come up and say, hey, if it wasn't for, you know, you making KBS, you know, 20 odd years ago, we wouldn't be doing this stuff. Yeah, so, you know, and not to kind of, you know, pat ourselves on the back or anything, but
the same goes with the session IPA, you know. If Jeremy Founders wasn't not playing around with session kind of beers, then it maybe was not an existing style, and that was the good at the beginning. You know, there's no one staying with a handgun next to him and saying, "Okay, you have to bring this beer out now because you found this." And so that's also a good question, you know, from Manfred, because Manfred is asking, are there any plans, you know, all day? It's kind of the session way of the beers out of Founders, and you're playing around with the hop forward beers. But is there any idea to bring out the stout? Kind of sessionable stout?
Yeah, that's definitely been on my mind. I guess the thing with all day also comes a bit of how much, you know, is it sessionable enough that you're going to buy it in a 15 pack and drink it in a reasonable amount of time. You know, I think that I could make a pretty killer sessionable stout. And maybe we just go that route, but to me still, it's like all day you buy a 15 pack and you do some damage to it. That's just kind of you know, what's in my mind about that beer. But you know, there's plenty of styles that can be made sessionable. I guess it's just, is there the volume there
and the demand behind the stout?
Can it be a volume brand? And how's the margin on it too? Because as John alluded to, all day is a pretty good value for that beer and that price. You can't beat it. And there are other styles that, you know, that kind of get expensive too. And, you know, we've committed ourselves a bit to that line pricing of all day. And so we're a bit limited there too, more than I've ever been before. Never have had to think about margin before when I'm creating beers. You sell it for what it is. But once you get into these line extensions, you start thinking, well, this has to cost the same as this beer. So it kind of rules out a few styles.
Look, and arguably,
fair point, you know.
Sorry, Marcus. Arguably, you know, Jeremy, I think we could say we made a really good sessionable stout, and I'll beat the drum again in that, you know,
oatmeal stout.
Yeah, the oatmeal stout, right? 4.5%, really great nitro oatmeal stout. When we were commercializing that, I was drinking the hell out of it and selling the hell out of it. It was a great beer. But yeah, and it was this kind of sleeper beer we had for a while, Marcus, but they were only available on nitro, so we were limited on where to go with it, right? And even still, if you look at the breadth of the craft brewing world across the US and Europe, there's only a handful of breweries right now playing with nitrogen cans and low ABV stouts. So, you know, it's the market kind of reduces your ability to bring these things wide to the people.
And it was a fair point out of Jeremy, you know, because who really needs it? You know, a sessionable stout. Because we had this here in Europe, Brewdog, they brewed a non-alcoholic stout, you know. It was kind of fancy, but in the end of the day, who needs a non-alcoholic stout? And so what happened? They disappeared with this beer, you know. And when it came now to sessionable stouts, it's also kind of American, you know. People, when they see something dark, what's the first impression? Ooh, it must be intense and really highly ABV-wise. Because Guinness already, you know, because most of the people, they don't know that the beer style is a stout. They're drinking it, you know, and ABV-wise, it's already kind of 4.2 or 4.1. It's already kind of a sessional stout. So it's kind of tricky to bring it to the point, you know, what is a sessional stout?
Look, there's a lot to unpack with what you just said there, Marcus, and you brought up a thing about NA beers. Look, I think it was Deschutes this year just came out with a NA Obsidian Stout, and
you can't get this in Europe, so
you can't get these in Europe. But if there's a market anywhere in the world that's got an NA viability, it is Europe. There's way more non-alcoholic beers sold here than there is in the US. And you now look, we just had Guinness 00 come out, right? So it does exist. So I think people are banking on the fact that people want, just like you want an NA IPA. There's how many NA IPAs exist right now, right? Non-alcoholic IPAs,
you know.
So I
how
think
is it in the States?
Pretty limited. It's starting to. There are a couple players that are starting to do craft NA
athletic.
Yep. And to me, the quality is a little hit or miss. It's not super enjoyable to me to drink, but I do see opportunity where you could make a pretty good product. But again, is there the volume there? Because it will be an investment to pursue, a capital investment, a research investment. And is it worth it? Is it going to do what it does in Europe? Because our Spanish partners they sell a lot of NA beer, so they're kind of looking at us being like, you guys should do this, and we're like, well, yeah, maybe.
Not to back you up there, but that might have went on my innovation list for things we might brew in Spain, right, Jer?
Yeah, right. They're the experts at it. Why don't you guys just do it? Jeremy, Bernard is asking, KBS, is there any additional CO2? And when you add this, at what kind of temperature?
CO2, carbon dioxide?
Yes. At KBS, before you fill it, you add some CO2.
So we do.
Yes, at which temperature?
So we definitely purge all the barrels before we fill them with CO2. Push out all the oxygen, leave a nice layer of CO2 in there as you put the beer in. And then that's about it. You seal them up and you put them away, like I said, in this low humidity, low temperature area, where I think there's less breathing of that liquid into the wood than if it was warm and not. But that's it. Then once it comes out, we treat it like any other beer with plenty of CO2 purging into the tank that it's going to go into. But while it's in the barrels, it just does its thing.
Okay. And then he also asked, why there's a difference between the foam stability between the three different KBS.
Good question. It could have something to do
because of the additional flavors which you're adding.
Probably, yeah. There may be things that either encourage or discourage that foam. I haven't done a lot of investigating into, what is going on there. Generally, Founders beers don't have giant lasting foam. Not something we're super known for, but I appreciate at least a nice layer and some lacing on the glass. But those adjuncts will definitely have some effect on that foam.
Okay. Cool. It was super interesting, and we can extend it, but at the end, there is kind of a time frame and timeline. And I would ask all of you guys, if you had additional questions, then please come out now, because otherwise we're gonna finish this super interesting tasting, which was unbelievable flavorful from all day up to KBS cinnamon, vanilla, cocoa. It was really, really interesting to talk, especially to you, Jeremy, because Jonathan, we can reach easier, especially here in Europe. But
I love it. It was a great
opportunity. Maybe we're gonna see each other soon, and maybe you have something to spray out for the Austrian beer audience, because I'm pretty sure you know Austrians are used to drink lagers, and we have one of the best lagers worldwide, and that's what we are known for. And maybe I will get once the chance to come over to Rapid, or maybe we're gonna meet soon. Then I will bring some proper lagers, because that's normally, I know that all the Americans are really aiming for to get something proper brewed lager beers, because you get all these really intenseful IPAs and stouts and porters and barrel aged beers.
Marcus, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I'm at a phase of my life and my career where drinking lager is really what I want to do. So it's I'll
raise my hand to that. I'm drinking a lot of lager too, and
it's almost. Yeah, you come full circle, right? You start with lagers, and then you're searching for more, and then you find it, and then you get overwhelmed, and then you're like, you want to get back to. And I hope and I hope and pray, and people ask me about what do you see is what's coming up in the craft. I almost feel, because everything is cyclical, everything that was cool and goes out of style becomes cool again. I almost feel like it's time for more of get some traditional styles, lagers included. How about nice pale ales? I swear to God, I love pale ales so much. I'm just, you have so many beers, and it's fun to push your palate and overwhelm your palate and really just experience life. But when it comes down to drinking, a well-crafted lager or pale ale is where I'm at right now. I really, that's
to go for.
And I can see that I can see the consumer getting into that too, right? All the hipsters here in America, everything that's not cool and mainstream is cool for them. So, and that's how it starts, and then it becomes mainstream, and then it's not cool anymore. But I think it's time for traditional beers, lagers especially, to make a comeback. So I'm ready to embrace that, and I'm ready to learn more about traditional lagers, and obviously coming over to visit you in Austria would be a great place to start.
Yeah, it's kind of the place to be, Germany, Bavaria, Austria. We can teach and show.
I've my wife's been doing some ancestry DNA, and I do have ties. I have a great grandparents from Austria, Slovenia area there. So, yeah.
Then you're more than welcome.
Did you say you're coming over for? Did you say you're coming for CBC in a couple of months? Well, I will. Maybe I'll see you there, because I'm just signing up for that right now. Gonna get back to that. It's been a few years, and
okay. So then only let me know. Send me an email, and I will bring some lagers fresh for you. I promise.
Love it.
Easy. Jonathan.
Fair enough. Marcus, did we get any last minute questions from the group?
So far, not. So maybe you have now the last word for tonight.
I was very thorough in all of my speaking, so I'm sure I covered everything that people could possibly want.
For me, I mean, the last words, I guess, for the group today would be, we worked so long and hard, Marcus. I think you and I finally selling beer together is, personally, between each of us, finally a win, because we only talked about it for about 5 years before it happened.
15 can be already 15, so
yeah. And look, I know you were, I even know you were gray marketing some beer from Wally in Ireland for a while. It's okay, but I'm just glad that we're finally getting back, getting the chance to grow a bit in Austria and work with you guys. And I think probably a year from now we should come back and do this again. This has been a great opportunity. So. What I will say is, if there's any follow-up questions from the group, or if anything, you or Kevin Field, send them on to us. We'll get you answers. This is grand. In today's limited world of being face to face, this is kind of a unique thing. So
cool. Thank you. So the only thing is, you will be presented over the next year. So Founders will be available in Austria over us, because I really enjoy working, especially together with you, Jonathan, because that's why we always were in contact over the past of years. And then, of course, Jeremy, we had once a time to say cheers and hello. It's also kind of back in the days, but now we found the connection again, and I really appreciate, especially for you, Jeremy, because I know that you are really well-known guy in the beer industry, and I really appreciate that you take the time to get in contact with this small country in the middle of Europe, which is called Austria. And if you ever find the chance to say hello here in Austria, then of course you will let us know, and then we're gonna treat you well as you did tonight.
This is one of my favorite things about the industry is just talking to people and meeting people and sharing our love of beer and our knowledge and experience. So it's one of those parts of the job that I appreciate the most. So it was a pleasure.
Cool. So, und allen euch zu Hause sage ich danke, dass ihr wieder dabei seid. Danke, dass ihr weiterhin auf unsere Qualität vertraut. Und wir kommen natürlich mit den nächsten Verkostungen. Und die nächste wird sein circa Ende April mit einer belgischen Brauerei. Es ist Brauerei Heige von Delirium. Das genaue Datum steht noch nicht fest. Und dann habe ich etwas Spezielles, dass wir am 1.4., also dass wir von 1.4. bis 3.4. natürlich so weit, dass Covid das alles zulässt, am Badeschiff das erste kleine Kraftbierfest wieder gemeinsam veranstalten werden unter dem Namen Craft Village. Also jeder, der Zeit hat, 1.4. bis 3.4. am Badeschiff in Wien, gibt es die Möglichkeit, gemeinsam mit uns ein Bier zu trinken. Es ist Brewing dabei, es ist Next Level dabei, es ist der Rotan dabei. Also wirklich so eine lokale Geschichte machen wir und veranstalten wir in Wien. Und ich würde mich freuen, den einen oder anderen von euch zu sehen. In diesem Sinne, danke fürs Dabeisein. Einen schönen Abend und ich hoffe, ihr habt Spaß gehabt. Danke, bis zum nächsten Mal.